Good afternoon and welcome back to Tax Calc TV. I'm Andy North and this week it's all about R&D claims. What makes a solid claim that will pass the scrutiny of HMRC's highly vigilant investigators. Why they're taking such a keen interest in R&D at the moment, and what happens when your client gets embroiled in a potentially suspect claim. When a third-party advisor gets their teeth into them. Luckily for you, it's not just me providing this advice. We have, as always, a stellar lineup of experts to do that. As always, I'm joined by Dean Shepherd. He's our resident Director of Customer Education and Engagement. And once again, we're back by popular demand and hugely grateful to have David Logan and Lorraine Ellison on hand to share their knowledge and first-hand experience of dealing with R&D claims. Some of you may recall David and Lorraine were with us back in September to look at tax planning in turbulent times. We had so many questions relating to R&D that we wanted to invite them back to focus specifically on that. Thanks so much for sharing your valuable time with us, guys. If you didn't make that session, David is the founder and MD of tax research and head of tax research at the TAG community. David, do you want to tell us a little bit about the TAG community?
Yes, thank you for that, Andy. My name's David Logan and I'm a chartered tax advisor. I've worked in tax now for over 30 years. We've been working with the SME accountants and their clients for the last 8 or 9 years. And effectively, we're a one-stop shop for accountants and to support their clients in relation to advisory services, such as tax, financial planning, insolvency. Yep.
Thank you. And Lorraine, resident Lorraine. Lorraine's been a veteran of our sessions and she's the owner of Simply Editions. She's a Tax Calc fangirl and also a member of David's TAG community. Lorraine, you've had some tangles recently with some R&D claims, is that right?
Hi, yes. I've got 2 just recent cases, so it's very apt that we're talking about R&D today. But yes, I've got a practice up in near Sunderland. And I've been preparing tax returns for 16 years. And thankfully, if I get anything complicated, I send it to the TAG community.
Always helps. So it seems that HMRC are digging in for something of a battle over R&D, and that might make for some difficult conversations with some of your clients. But before we get into why that is happening and what you can do about it, we have a little bit of obligatory housekeeping. We love to hear your questions and your comments. That's why we're doing this, because we had so many questions last time. Please, we're going to really just focus on chat this time. So if you want to focus all your comments and questions into the chat, everyone will see those. If you do have a desire to speak to us specifically, if you use the Q&A box, that will only be seen by us on the panel, but not by everyone else in the audience. Yes, there will be a recording of this sent out at the end. Now, I'm going to place a bet that it will take roughly 9 minutes for the first person to say, will there be a recording in the chat? So if anyone wants to place a bet, just put that into the chat. Just put a number of how many minutes you think it'll be until someone asks whether there will be a recording. But I'll put you at ease. There will be a recording. So let's get started. David, do you want to give us a little bit of background into kind of what's been happening in the R&D sector in the last few years? Why are we here? Why are we talking about this?
Okay, so I don't know if people remember, back in January 22, HMRC basically put a stop to all R&D claims and effectively stopped making any repayments. And it turns out the reason for this, that there was a significant number of fraudulent R&D, SME R&D claims that were submitted to HMRC at the time. So, and we're talking about these claims are worth millions. So as a result of these fraudulent claims that went in, this whole inquiry system into HMRC, into SMEs, in particular the SME sector, was started. As you'd imagine, it put a lot of businesses under stress because a lot of SMEs who do R&D were, counting on these repayments coming back to them. So it's really important, to get a bit of an understanding of why this is happening. Now, taking the analogy a bit like the weatherman, we see a storm is coming, and you're always told about, yellow or red warning. Well, I think at the moment we're in just at the very beginning of the storm. So to give you an idea of where we are, there's around the revenue opens up a few thousand cases, which they believe around 5% of SME claims have recently been opened. They believe up to 50% of SME claims are in one form or other incorrect or fraudulent. So as you can imagine, that we're just at the beginning of the storm, which is coming in for the R&D claims. So that just gives you a broad overview of the sort of these issues, and there's a few key themes that are coming out of that, and a lot of it is to do around these scrupulous R&D agents that are phoning unsuspecting accountants' clients and telling them they've got an R&D claim. And we'll talk about some of these claims that have been put in. And I was recently on a webinar and a presentation with Rebecca Bennyworth, the titan of the tax presentation world, and even one of her clients was hit, which ended up being a care home, which basically is unbelievable. And they did it behind her back. So that's what they're trying to crack down on, all these scrupulous fraudulent claims that are going in. Unfortunately, HMRC are taking a hammer to crack a nut, and it's creating waves across the whole sector, and it's impacting on everyone, even the proper claims. And even my institute now have been in touch with HMRC on a regular basis and talking about how they're going after unfair claims and just disallowing them. So the other key point to note as well, and then again we're going to be talking about this, is how the provision of these type of services and whether it should be part of it, where there's a risk for around insurances and so forth. So I think the key thing here is that there's a lot changing. We'll talk about some of those changes, but I think the first thing is to get a bit broad picture as to what these HMRC inquiries are doing for clients.
So what was it? Because I saw a letter that the CIOT sent to HMRC, and it implied that the approach by HMRC was simply to take a very cursory look. If they could spot something where, okay, I can already see that product commonly available, they would just set up an inquiry, real blanket, without a great deal of investigation. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this literally all they were doing was they would just Google it. So say they had a product, and so we'll take these the team. There's two particular teams that have been set up for these R&D inquiries, but they don't have a particular sector base. They've just got training in R&D claims, and they'll look at a particular product, and they'll Google it, and they might find a similar. When they Google it, they'll see, oh yeah, this person has got the same or similar product online, so therefore how can it be R&D, which is totally irrelevant for the way R&D claims work. So a lot of claims are getting dismissed on that basis. So to give you an idea, when they first started out looking at R&D claims, the numbers of claims that they thought they were going to look at was around 300 million. They now estimate that they're looking to possibly collect an additional 1.1 billion in tax, and really focusing on the SME sector, and in particular the very small claims as well, because they believe probably over 50% of those ones are incorrect.
It sounds as if what they're saying is we are not really we're going to put the onus on you to prove that this is a real claim, as opposed to them proving that it isn't. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the problem is that if you're getting an inquiry, that it's an open and shut case to them. They're just basically saying, unless you can really prove that there's an R&D and you fall within the guidelines that have been issued in relation to the R&D research, then absolutely they're going to deny them. It's an easy win for them. They've got these caseworkers, and they're seeing this as an opportunity to collect additional taxes and or interest and or penalties as well. So it is very much, we're seeing a lot of claims being turned down for one reason or another, and you're forcing clients to make a decision. So to take the normal process, should the client they submit the R&D claim to HMRC, they may get a rebate, they may not. But saying they do get a refund, the revenue will then open an inquiry. You then have to submit the reasons why you think R&D is applicable. HMRC, on the claims that I've seen, and again, a feeling within the sector generally is that HMRC are just denying it in the majority of cases. They then said, well, we don't believe there's R&D because of X, Y, Z. You then have to go for an independent review. More often than not, that independent review will say no. And then the client then has to make a decision, right? Is it worth the commercial risk of trying to take this to court in order to save 6, 7, 10, 15,000? Because the claims we're talking about, well, the ones I've seen are generally on the very small side. So the commercial risk of, against professional fees for fighting them can be, quite extensive versus the savings. So the majority of clients will just decide, well, actually, what's the point of fighting it? The cost, the cost for it outweighs the benefit.
Yeah.
So even though they believe there's a general, I mean, this is a particular case on one of our claims that the client made the decision that actually we just can't fight it, even though it didn't cost them anything, because as part of the things we'll talk about is that we cover them for any inquiries, but they'd made a decision to actually, well, we can't fight it anymore. We're just going to have to just accept it. And unfortunately, this is what skews the figures, because the figures then show that, the revenue have turned over a failed claim, when strictly, if they followed the due process and allowed and actually looked into the technicalities of it, because they don't have technical experts in IT, engineering, science, whatever it is, they just have someone following a computer screen that says computer says no. And that's the unfortunate situation. So clients are having to make a commercial decision about whether or not to challenge it or not.
So it's kind of a win-win for HMRC there. They really can't lose.
Yeah. Absolutely. Which is why I said that's why exactly what I said. We're at the eye of the storm. We're at the beginning of the storm. This is only the beginning. And it's an easy win for HMRC. And the clients who've done R&D claims, unless they've done very detailed analysis of the reasons why, and are actually able to challenge the revenue, are going to find their claims are going to be probably disallowed.
But of course, you can't, as an accountant, you've still got an obligation to be bringing this up and to helping your clients make those claims. Otherwise, you're at jeopardy. So it's putting, I think, accountants in a pretty nasty place. So let's get into the detail. What kind of examples have we got? Lorraine, you mentioned a couple that you've got. What are you working on right now? What are you playing with?
Well, I can't tell you the detail.
Of course.
It's protected knowledge. However, one of my clients was approached by one of these firms who sells this sort of service, and to my knowledge, they hadn't actually done any R&D, because they don't actually do anything unusual, but they are working in engineering, and it's gone on. This company has been talking to my client for like 7 months, and the first I've heard of it is when I've gone down to actually talk to the client about other things. So my immediate reaction was, because I've listened to David and some of the warnings, was, oh my God, who are they? Are they going to steal money off my client, get the fees, and then there's going to be a inquiry later? So I've checked into them, but I'll be sending the details to David so he can check on as well. But they do seem legitimate. They're from a big 4 firm, and it looks reasonable. However, there's still this risk. Having listened to what David said about them just rejecting claims, I have a feeling that they're going to do this. So I've warned my client in writing that it's a risky process they're going through. They could end up paying the fee, which is higher than most firms charge anyway, and then they might not get the money back. So they'll be left out of the pocket with a fee, and they'll get the money, spend it, and then have to pay it back. So it's a bit worrying.
So these people approached your client without your involvement or knowledge. Is
Absolutely.
That right?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm shocked, and it's must be my own fault because I've not spreaded the word enough to say that we do R&D claims. So that's the first thing, just to let people know, let your clients know that if they do want to make an R&D claim, that they can actually do it through you and you can get a reputable firm on board.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be you doing it, right? It could be, as you do, work with a partner to do it, but it's better that they know that you're doing it so that they don't disappear off with someone who you've discovered. So how did this play out? That your client just told you? When did you find out that this was going on?
I found out because the R&D company rang me asking me for information, just randomly. Obviously, I just ignored the phone calls, but it didn't go away. So I rang my client and asked them. And they said, oh, yeah, we're just exploring it at the moment. And I was like, well, what on earth have you been doing? That's R&D. And so I got quite a few phone calls. But in the end, I have had to speak to them because the client has already signed terms.
Right.
So I've got to go along with it. And it's better to cooperate rather than just say I'm not helping, because I need to at least alert the client to the risks and obviously provide the information and submit the claim.
So, will this R&D company then, are they allowing you access? Will they share with you the R&D reports and stuff? Are you and the because that's one of the biggest issues we have seen with these dubious R&D cowboys, if you want to call them that, is they will just. I've seen claims where they get the clients to sign up for 3 years, they're tied in for 3 years. They won't let the accountant see the R&D report, and they submit everything to HMRC, and therefore, and these claims go in without the accountant's knowledge or anything. So I'm just wondering what they...
In this case, no, I'm controlling the process. I won't give them access to QuickBooks. Ask them to tell me what information they need. I'll provide the information, and then they want me to submit the claim as part of the CT 600. So I'm comfortable to that point, but I don't know how strong a case the R&D will be. But I'll get a copy of the report, and I'll be able to assess the risk before I submit it anyway.
Yeah.
I've checked the agreement, David, and it does say that if HMRC do an inquiry and recall the money, then they'll refund the fees.
Okay. Yeah. And I suppose at that point as well, I think it's worth noting now. I mean, I suppose as you know, again, it's okay working with providers who do R&D. I says we do it as well. We're helping accountants, but I think it's important from the accountant's perspective that when they're speaking to their clients, make sure that it's been noted from a risk perspective that all the risk, as you've done clearly, is making sure that they're aware of the risk of doing this R&D claim. It's got nothing to do with you, and it's all to do with the R&D company that's providing that service. And should they be aware that if it does go wrong, that they'll be subject to interest and or penalties as well.
So that one that you're referring to, Lorraine, that sounds potentially like it might be completely legitimate and that they will get that claim through. You mentioned earlier, and Rebecca had mentioned the one about a care home, an old people's home, who had that someone claimed that they were doing some R&D. Now, it's quite sinister to think that they are doing R&D in an old people's home. But what else are you seeing? How many of these do you suspect are completely kind of out there, that claims like that, rather than legitimate and arguable?
I think, to be fair, let's just focus on that. I mean, and again, I'm not probably speaking out of turn because, it was Rebecca when she stood up in the presentation. She talked about one particular client, and we're talking about a care home, and this exactly what they did. These cowboy rogue agents phoned the client directly, did the R&D claim, submitted it, and provided no information at all to Rebecca. And the last thing Rebecca knew was that they submitted this claim, whatever. And eventually she had to explain to the client that it was wrong, and in order to try and unwind it. Unfortunately, we just don't know the numbers. As I said, HMRC are aware of these rogue agents. we just don't know what the numbers are. The problem is that it's the issues is that it's seeping into genuine claims, and now SMEs now are actually, and it's actually only reported last week that they're actually, well, is it worth the bother claiming that, these R&D reliefs at all, because of the nature of HMRC, basically just saying no to everything.
So we're seeing here then we've got a situation where there's some potentially rogue agents, we've got some potentially legitimate agents, but the number of R&D claims is skyrocketing. HMRC's response is to double down. I think you mentioned they were increasing their staff by, I think it was 50%, you said?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, basically they're putting a lot of investing in retraining of staff. They've opened up two particular teams. Basically, the two teams are what they called, just written it down, is the ISBC and the WMBC unit. One's off for the IS teams, effectively just the general claims, the smaller claims. Where it gets a bit more technical, then it does go up to the WMBC team, and they meant to have a bit more skill sets and more technical knowledge. However, generally they go into one pool unless you get a proper technical officer that will deal with it. But as I said, we're looking at the moment 5% of claims are being under inquiry at the moment, but they believe up to 50 could be wrong, 50%.
Right.
So this is a huge area of over the next few years, and as I said, clients will have to make a decision: is it worth the fight? Is it worth? Because a lot of them the computer is saying no, and we're having my institute. I was on a call the other week about it. They're getting the same output as well from their clients. That my institute are again trying to push back, but the revenue see it as an easy win. To be honest with you, they'll just say no.
Dean, what about you? What are your thoughts? Did you do a lot of R&D when you were running a firm?
It's a good question. I certainly had. Well, I suppose I had clients that fell into a couple of different camps. So I'd have the one camp of clients that were almost certainly undertaking some form of R&D activities, and because of the generosity of those reliefs, I don't want to have them miss out on the opportunity to be making claims. But on the other hand, it's an area that is perhaps fraught with technical difficulty because a lot of it seems so opinion-based. Who is the expert who's able to determine whether you are advancing the current state of play in that realm of science or technology? So it's very difficult because at the end of the day, the clients are usually the expert or have the experts within that organisation. You've got to take what they say as read to some degree. You can certainly outline the rules and regulations around R&D and make it clear what is possible to claim and what isn't. But at the end of the day, if the client is telling you we're experts in this field, we're taking it beyond what the current capability is, then it's very difficult. It's probably not your place to argue against that.
Well, yeah, you're going to have to find.
HMRC are taking that stance of arguing against it.
Yeah, you're going to have to find another expert who can say actually yes or no to justify that, and that. Yeah, who are you to do that when?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, in an ideal world, if HMRC are investing all these claims, they would have a bank of experts or access to experts to validate what is being said by the claiming company. But HMRC don't have the resources for that. So it does feel at the moment that they've got a huge amount of claims to get through. They're very suspicious about a large number of them, but they don't have enough resources to investigate them properly. So we are seeing wildly varying results coming out of those inquiries. And I think you mentioned the other day the CIOT wrote an open letter to HMRC and have published their response setting out the complaints they have that their members have witnessed in how HMRC are handling these claims, and HMRC's response is there on the CIOT website for everyone to read.
I've not read the response yet, so what was their response to that?
I think like most HMRC responses, fairly guarded, restating the legislation, their belief that, as David says, around I believe that around 50% of claims are spurious, and to some degree acknowledging the fact that they don't have the resources, but they are expanding them to cover it. But they certainly won't acknowledge some of the things I think that have been going on, which is clearly people that don't have knowledge in this area doing a bit of Google searching online, finding other products that they think negates the fact that your client has extended science and technology. So you've got one kind of bank of clients that legitimately should be making claims, but perhaps it's so small that you think, is it worth the time and effort, particularly in the current climate of them, checking everything? And that's a discussion to have with the client. And then you've got another bank of clients that feel they're entitled to make a claim, even though they're doing businesses that really aren't in the areas of science and technology, but their friend down the pub has told them you need to be making R&D claims, and it's worth huge amounts of money. That's the difficulty.
And I think also you've got businesses making genuine investment, long-term decisions. Their whole profit line is based on their R&D claim, and that could be in jeopardy because of the approach HMRC are taking. Because is it the rogue agent's fault or is it HMRC's fault? I don't know. We'll continue on, because what I was really interested to do in the light of this this situation, it'd be brilliant to remind us all of what really does make a sound R&D claim. What does a good one look like if you're going to get past the scrutiny of HMRC?
This is worth talking about some of the key changes that are going to be coming in or have come in since the 1st of April. So basically to try and combat HMRC and in particular the rogue agents, basically from the 1st of April this year, as well as submitting the CT600 with the R&D claim itself, a additional portal has now been set up by HMRC where you have to submit in advance of that CT600 going in is an additional information form, which effectively should be the report. And this will basically take you through all the details of what that R&D entails. And the reasons for this is that as part of these forms is you have to put your name down as who's responsible for it. So whether that's the company, so you have to have a specific name within the company that's going to be responsible for this claim, and 2, the R&D person who's completing it on behalf of the client. So that could be the accountant or an R&D agent. So, for example, the ones that we're doing at the moment for clients, we're submitting it as their R&D agent. So my name as the MD for Tag Tax would go on that form. And this is all really important because what it's trying to do is flush out those claims that are just spurious and so forth. And to give an example, again, I can't believe this, there was a report that was issued by HMRC that for basically since the 1st of April, since the 1st of August when this came in, 50% of claims that have been submitted to the revenue did not complete this additional information form, what was completely missing, which means that the R&D claim can't be, they'll just reject it straight away. So moving on to the next slide, it then talks about how the projects that you also have to go into detail, and you can't just put down one particular project. You have to describe all the projects, and in particular, as it says there, you have, if they're doing a 1 to 3 project, then you have to describe them all and the activities that those R&D claims are doing. If they're doing between 4 and 10, then a minimum of 3, where you have to submit 50% of the total qualifying expenditure. So this is where, so say for example, your client has undertaken £100,000 worth of R&D expenditure, then you have to cover up to 50% of those costs, i.e. 50,000. You have to put it by the project. So potentially this is leading down the road where if you've got dozens of different projects on a particular R&D, in particular in a particular accounting period, then they can disallow one project or one if it doesn't fall within it. So they've been a bit more stringent in that. So as I said, you don't have to do them all. Just as long as up to 50%. Just move to the next slide, please. And then, as it said, the qualifying expenditure is broken down by project, and it must include any indirect activity as well. And then, as it says there, you've got additional accounting expenditure which can now be claimed, including cloud computing costs, storage and data license purely for the scientific backgrounds. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So this is the key thing here about these R&D claims, and this is always so when pre this system coming in, we would do an R&D report that covered all of this. So within the report, you have to first explain what the main field of science and technology they're looking to work in, the baseline of science and technology that they're looking at, what advances they're actually trying to achieve in that particular product or and so forth. What were the uncertainties? So what was the process that they had to go through in order to to achieve that, and how did they overcome these uncertainties? So each of these categories within this form itself, the company or the R&D agent will have to physically explain that and the reasons why they believe they fall within the R&D guidelines. And in particular, just on that as well, it's important to note that the HMRC reissued those guidelines a few weeks back, again stipulating what they believe is R&D and so forth. And one of the key projects we would always do when we're looking at R&D is that we would assist the client in looking at this as a project brief and do a quick desktop review to ensure that they, if they believe these products or their services fell within these areas.
So we've got a question about how long before you submit the CT600 do you need to submit the additional information form?
Well, ideally, the additional information form should be submitted before the CT600 is submitted to HMRC. That's, and in reality, the revenue will not allow a claim to go through unless that form has been submitted first. So strictly speaking, that form should go in. So what we're doing, again, from a compliance perspective, working with the accountant, is that we would firstly get the report agreed, and everyone agreed, get the client to agree that they're happy with the R&D itself, and going through those categories. Subject to that, then we would then submit the advanced information form, and then only then do we then hand it back to the accountant and give them the information they need then to submit the CT600. So we've just done one, for example, this week where we're submitting one for November 21 and November 22, given the year end is quite close to the end of the year. So we're just getting that process done now.
And do you have any advice to, if there is one of our viewers watching who, in terms of how much supplementary information or the way they provide supplementary information, do you have any advice on that? I presume it's provide as much as you can, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Just again, following those key 5 areas I've said in that last PowerPoint slide, they're the key areas that every claim or every report should be included, and the reasons why R&D is applicable or not. Without them, then there'd be no claim. So that has to go on the advanced information form regardless. Okay,
so what about? I mean, there are some ancillary points to this, and one we were discussing earlier, insurance. So if you're doing, I think Lorraine, you mentioned that there were some changes in your professional indemnity insurance if you started doing R&D. Is that right? What's happened there?
I've been doing one R&D claim every year for one of my clients. They work in the nuclear industry and they spend a lot of their time doing R&D. And I only do the one, but when I went to renew my insurance, they said there was an extra premium. The risk is considered higher, so I have to pay a higher premium for doing one R&D claim. I've gone ahead with it, but then, I might need to review it going forward. I'm just going to put the fee up to the client.
Right.
It's just one of those things. But yes.
So it's one thing worth considering. And then the other side of it was we were talking about this, and I think the answer is we're not quite sure. It's going to depend on you. Is whether if you are investigated or your client is investigated because they did something external to you. So you're advising a client, they are approached by an R&D agent. They then go ahead and submit a CT outside of anything that you don't know about it. Whether that would be covered by any investigation insurance, any fee protection insurance that you might have. I think the answer is we don't know, but it's certainly something to be considered. Lorraine, I don't know, or David, do you have any more points on that?
Well, I would be really upset if a client had allowed an agent to file a CT 600 with an R&D claim and not let me know. So there would be a disengagement going on, because that just isn't right. We're part of a collaborative relationship. But one of the things is, if you do notice, and you can spot this by a change on HMRC's website, but you've got to go and looking for it, is to write to your client and just say, look, this is not part of the work that we've done. Can we have a chat about the risk or something like that? I think we've got to be upfront, and you can't just say R&D is too difficult, I'm not doing it. You've got to say to your clients, alert them to say, you might get approached by somebody, you need to come and talk to us, do not sign anything until we've looked into it for you, because there are risks attached. Don't be, bright shiny extra money on the promise of extra money coming through. So it's about communicating to the clients and then taking some proper advice from people who are worth talking to. So that's why, being part of the target community, I don't have to worry about that, because I know I've got somebody I can trust.
You've
and there
got
are
the backup.
other people out there who can.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just on that point. I mean, yeah, as Lorraine says, I mean, just following through with that. If a client has gone behind the accountant's back, there's no two ways about it, done an R&D claim, and that accountant has got what we call, fee protection insurance for inquiries, then if I was the insurance company, and again, playing devil's advocate here as we're looking into the answers, why would they pay out for something where they've had, they expect to support the accountant when they had no input into that R&D claim? So I'd be very surprised if they would, to be honest with you. So you've got to think, it's similar to like any car insurance. You've got to be very strict in the way you describe what you do in your car and so forth, and who's able to drive it in order to be covered. I imagine it's the same with the fee protection as well. But it's a very good point. And I think the point as well, just following what Lorraine was saying about insurance, professional indemnity insurance, absolutely. I have no doubt that if claims, this will be another opportunity for insurance companies to basically up premiums for accountants if it's not their specialist area, given the high profile of these claims. And I'll reiterate what I said earlier, we're looking at 5% of claims at the moment under inquiry, potentially 50% of revenue, believe are wrong, and we haven't even touched on penalties yet.
Yeah, exactly. And did you want to talk about the penalties? Just give us a quick run through of what the penalties, what you could be expecting.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we have seen in the claims that we've seen where they're under inquiry, so the revenue are not only basically disallowing the R&D, they're actually charging them with penalties and saying that the clients are being careless. Now, this is a total nonsense, to be honest with you, especially if you've used a proper agent and so forth and knows what they're talking about, and they've just taken the decision. So that not only is the accountant having to defend the position of the R&D claim, they have to spend time dealing with the penalty position. On the cases that we have seen or dealt with, we've managed to get those penalties swiftly cancelled and removed. But it's just another burden placed on accountants and their clients and having to deal with HMRC correspondence, and it's easy to miss these things. So you've got to normally reply within 30 days. And if you remember, these penalties can be anything from 15% upwards.
Wow. And then there's interest as well.
Absolutely. Regardless of the penalty position, if they decide to basically accept that their claim is not allowable, then HMRC will expect the corporation tax to be paid and as a result of that, interest will be payable on that from the date of due date. So as you imagine, interest rates are running at 7-8% at the moment. Interest can rack up very quickly.
So there's a lot at risk. I mean, if your client is approached, you could end up having a very difficult conversation with them, potentially be disengaging with them. You could be talking about them paying some quite stiff penalties. It's not a pleasant situation to get into. So before we wrap up, let's look at some of the things. And Lorraine, you talked about some ideas earlier about what can we do? What's the best sort of route, the best route of action for an accountant who is trying to do the right thing?
I think the first thing is to communicate. One, to alert people that they might be approached independently. Secondly, about what the risks are. And to keep the message quite brief, because if you write too much, they'll not read it. And also talking to the clients. And you might think a client doesn't work and do any R&D, but things keep coming out the woodwork.
Yeah.
So I think it's communication and just alerting them to the risks.
So making sure that they know that you are able to handle any R&D claims that they may have, and that you're able to get involved. Also, I know you spoke earlier about making sure you get a second opinion as well.
Yes, always get a second opinion and hedge your bets about the risk, because even though you might think something's rock solid, as David's quite rightly pointed out, HMRC might say, well, you're not getting it. We found something else on the internet. And where does that leave you? You're putting yourself at risk. So we have to protect our own risk as well as protect the client's risk. And it's all about communication, warnings, risk management, and rely on somebody who you can trust to give you a second opinion.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you very, very much, guys, for coming in. I don't know, Dean, have you got any points to wrap up?
No, I just reiterate, I think what Lorraine has said about communication, the importance of it with your clients. I think as we get busier and busier, particularly as we're approaching tax season, on the one hand, you're super busy, so you don't always have time to have those one-on-one conversations with clients, but actually it's a time of year when you do have those touch points with almost all your client base. So if there are pertinent issues, or you think that the stuff that's super important to raise and discuss with the client, then as busy as you are, maybe now's not a bad time to raise some of these things so they don't get
caught out. Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you very, very much, Lorraine. Thank you very, very much, David. Wonderful to have you in. Perhaps we'll come back next year and we'll have a look at what has happened with the 50%, when they reach that 50% peak, what kind of crisis we're going to be in at that point. But always lovely to have you. And for anyone else, this is the last Tax Calc TV of the year. We won't be back until February, where we've got something very special for Valentine's Day. But we will be here for the Power Hour on the 6th of December, where we'll be having our Christmas quiz. We're all very much looking forward to that, and we hope you can join us. Keep an eye out. There will be emails coming out to alert you and allow you to register for the Power Hour on the 6th of December at 2 p.m. for the Christmas quiz, where there will be prizes available. Until then, thank you very, very much, and we'll see you soon.